folks, this is Vince with Dad's Gaming Addiction, and today we're going to check out the game Babel. It's for 2 players for ages 13 and up, with the average play time being about 45 minutes. The idea of this game is pretty simple. Become the greatest monarch by constructing the most imposing and majestic temples. So without further ado, let's take a quick look at the components and see how the game is played. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and explain the components and game setup all in one foul swoop. This is your game board here. It is put between both players. The board contains 5 construction sites, each of a different color. You've got yellow, blue, gray or silver, green, and red. At least I think that's gray and silver. But these colors match what you would find in this faction deck over here. And these colors represent a particular faction, like the yellow is the Hittites, and I apologize if I mispronounce these. The Sumerians are red. The Persians are this gray/silver color. The Medes, I think is how you pronounce that, is green, and the Assyrians is blue. And each has a special ability, which I'll get into a little bit later. So this is your faction deck. You're going to shuffle this up. The starting player gets 3 cards, the other one gets 5. Also on the board, you've got this temple deck. What you're going to want to do is pull a temple valued at 1 for each player. So there's a temple valued at 1 here, and a temple valued at 1 here. And players have to play this on their first turn. I'll explain how you do that a little bit later. The rest of the cards are simply shuffled into a deck. Finally, you're going to have these pawns here. Each player gets 1, and they're put into the quarry to start with. Okay, so a player's turn is pretty simple. At the beginning of a player's turn, they'll draw 3 cards from the faction deck to add to their hand. After that, they can play as many actions as they want to, so as long as they can play the actions. I'll get into what the actions are in a little bit. And then finally, at the end of a player's turn, they'll draw 2 cards from this temple deck, put them in ascending order, and then place them on top of their already established temple stack. Again, this one here needs to be played on a player's first turn. But after that, players will start to accumulate these temple cards, and whenever you pick up 2, you have to put them in ascending order and put it on top of the stack. You do not rearrange the cards already in the stack, only the 2 that you pick up. Okay, so like I was saying, a player can take a number of different actions on their turn. In order to show you what those actions are, I'm going to go ahead and play out a sample turn. Again, this is the starting player. He starts with 3 cards. At the beginning of his turn, he's going to draw 3 cards, add that to his hand, and then from here he can take a number of different actions. Let's go ahead and sort these real quick. Okay, so the first thing a player could do on their turn is move their building pawn to one of these construction sites here. To do that, you're going to discard a card of the color that you want to move it to. So if you want to move to this gray construction site, for example, you need to discard a gray card. If you wanted to move the pawn over to the red space over here, you'd have to discard a red card, so on and so forth. We're going to just go ahead and move this pawn over here. Now, the other thing a player could do on their turn is deploy a nation card. They have to basically play a card whenever they do this right below the board like so, and it has to be on the site in which the pawn is located. They could not play a card over here, or over here, or over here, because the pawn is not there. The player could play a card here, though, because the pawn is situated there. And again, you can do that as many times as you want to. Okay, so there is an example like that. Now, the other thing a player could do on the turn is construct a temple. And in order to construct a temple, the pawn has to be located at that location. And what you're going to do is you're going to take the top temple from either stack. You can take it from your opponent's, or you can take it from yours. And you'll put it on this space here, wherever your pawn is situated. Now, these have to go in ascending order. So you'll start with the 1, and then at some point, one of you 2 will have a 2 showing. You can grab that, put the 2 there. If you get a 3, you can put that on top of that, and so on and so forth. But the stipulation here is that you have to have as many cards here equal to or greater than the value that you're trying to put down. So in order for me to put a 3 down here, if I already had a 1 and a 2 here, in order for me to put a 3 down on top of that, I have to have 3 cards here, which I do. I could not put a 4 here because I do not have 4 cards situated here. And again, I'll show you that in a minute. I could put a 1 here, which is what I'm going to do. In fact, on the player's first turn, they have to play the cards sitting in front of them. After that, the cards will just simply stack on top of this. This pawn never ends up going back here. These temple cards just eventually stack in these 2 locations. So that's an example of building a temple. Okay, and then after that, a player could perform a migration. Now, this is once per turn. Like I said, a player can take as many actions as they want, as many times as they want. However, when it comes to migrations, you can only do that once per turn, and that involves taking any 3 cards, no matter where they are, wherever the pawn is. You can move those 3 cards somewhere else. No more, no less. So you cannot take 2 cards and move them. You have to take 3 cards and move them somewhere else. That's once per turn. Finally, you can use a nation's special ability. Now, like I said, each of these cards has, each faction, each color, has a special ability. The Sumerians, change camps. The green cards, desertion. You've got destroy a temple is blue. Steal 1 temple level is yellow. The Persians, skip a temple level. And I'm not going to bother going over each of those special abilities, but suffice it to say that the manual does cover these somewhere. I know there's... I could have sworn there was a place in the manual that covers all of these cards. I thought, oh, here we go. Okay, so yeah, there's a brief paragraph or 2 on each of these special abilities and how they are handled. Now, instead of using a nation's special ability, a player could instead use a generic ability. You can do that with any color, and that is causing your opponent to discard half of their hand rounded down. And after a player is done taking all of those different actions, like I said, they're going to draw 2 cards from the temple deck, and they're going to put them in ascending order so that the lesser value is on top. In this case, there's a 5 and a 6, so the 5 goes on top, 6 goes underneath it, and they're going to put it on top like so, on top of their temple stack. And again, players will be adding to this throughout the game, and so will the other player. They'll be adding to their own stack, and then that'll end their turn. Okay, so there's one other thing I'd like to add, or maybe a few things I'd like to add to that last shot. I got so distracted talking about the types of special abilities, I forgot to tell you when you can use them and how you use them. Well, first of all, you have to have your pawn on that location if you're going to use that card special ability. The other stipulation is that you have to have 3 consecutive cards of the same color. It doesn't matter if there are other cards behind them, like let's say throughout the game, let's say I added this card at some point, so there's a yellow on top of 3 green ones. That doesn't matter. So as long as they are together and on the same construction site and your pawn is situated there, you can discard one of those cards and use that color special ability. So this green one would go into the discard pile. This yellow card would go back like that, and then the green special effect can take place. Or, like I said, you can force your opponent to discard down. Now, let's say you had, I don't know if we're going to find another green card. We should. There's 12 of each color in the deck. But in the event that you have like 4 cards on top of each other of the same color, like so, you could use that special ability twice. So let's say that this was like this, and we had this. Okay, so you've got 4 green cards here and 1 red card on top. And like I said, in order to use a special ability, you have to discard 1 card from that consecutive pile. So that's gone. But you still have a group of 3 here. So at some point in the future, when your pawn is there, or even on the same turn, you can play that special ability again, and then whenever you do that, you'll remove this. And now you'll only have 2 cards left, and then you'd no longer be able to play that. So, again, this is an addendum to that last shot. Okay, so why are you doing all of this? Well, your goal here is going to be putting these temples onto these 5 spaces. And those values add up over time. Like, you start off with a 1 here, but eventually you're going to add a 2 to that. And then, if I can find a 3, that'd be awesome. Okay, maybe I'm not. Okay, there's the 3. and then the 4 to that. And you're going to do the same thing with these other spaces. You're going to start off with a 1. And you've got these special abilities too, and you can, possibly skip the 2, put a 3 down instead. You'll have some cards that remove your opponent's temples. So like if he had a 1 here, you could use a special ability and totally wipe it out, that kind of thing. But eventually you're going to have all of these temples sitting here, and they're going to be increasing in value. And the first player to have their temples add up to a value of 15 or more, and when their opponent has a value of 9 or less. So if I had like 17 here, and my opponent had like 7, then I would automatically win the game. In the event that I have 15 or more here, but my opponent does not have less than or equal to 9, then what will happen is the game will enter sudden death. The first player to get over 20 or more, or to get 20 or more points, will end up winning the game, or the first player to get to a value of 9 or less will lose the game. So long story short, what you're going to want to do, get these temples down and get them basically built up as high as you can. And in order to do that, you're going to be playing cards, using their abilities, getting rid of your opponent's temples, using them to fortify your own temples, that kind of thing. Alright, so there you have it, a very brief look at Babel. It's important to stress that I did not cover all of the rules found in the manual. This was just a brief overview to give you an idea as to how the game is played. Honestly, I think this game is fantastic. It is a bit aggressive though, meaning that you're going to be using these special abilities to sort of mess with your opponent big time. So the idea, like I said, was to build up your temples, but while you're doing that, there are special abilities that force your opponent to discard down to half their hand. There are abilities that cause them to destroy a temple or to remove a temple. And yeah, like I said, if you're playing with people that are offended easily, or let's just say are poor losers, and have sort of a temper when they're playing games, you may want to avoid this game. But if you manage to find a second player that is patient, is in it to have a good time, despite the fact that there is some aggressive gameplay in this, I think you'll have a great time. So yeah, Babel, if you guys want to check out my full written review, you can. www.dadsgamingaddiction.com. If you haven't already, subscribed to my YouTube channel. That way you can keep up to date with any new content I'm going to publish. This is Vince, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.